fellow parent, and it was interesting and good information to listen to, but it was kind of disheartening because you guys said the studies show people are less likely to believe something if they hear it from an official science source. And so that kind of raises the question for us when we're doing this, when our ideas are competing, we're all naturally kind of smart, organized thought. We think in that way, and we tend to assume that, well, if we present the best argument, we'll win. And that's really not the case. So how do you guys think we should approach that dilemma of saying we really do need to preach what or act what we preach? We need to be intelligent and thoughtful and to say things the right way, but we also need to do it in a way that's actually convincing.
Hold on. I say this all the time. We have to start with very young kids. That's where you got to teach critical thinking. That's where it'll work the best. It'll last the longest. I was just telling you before about I went into physical therapy for my leg, and there's an acupuncture sign there. It's like a little pamphlet holder, and the older the therapist got, the more they believed in acupuncture. The young college students that are like interning there and learning, they were basically they understood what acupuncture was, but they didn't say, oh, they totally believed in it. But the older people, the older they were, the more they believed in it. And I don't know if that's definitely an anecdote coming from my life. But the bottom line is, if we teach kids critical thinking, they'll make these decisions on their own. And I actually think the high school age is kind of pushing it. It's almost too late at that point. Yeah.
I have to say, this came up we were just at Skepticon last weekend, and this came up, this idea of it being too late. And I do have to say that it's just not true. Speaking as someone who, post-college, I had no interest in science after 5th grade. I got into science through magic. I was a magician. And that's how I got in. And I think that illustrates perfectly that we shouldn't get disheartened when we hear things like people, don't trust scientists. What we need to do is learn from that and realize that there are other, maybe better ways to reach people than lecturing to them. And look at South Park. I think is a very good example. Right. I think more kids learn skepticism through South Park.
Whether they know it or not.
Yeah. Whether they know it or not, than through any other medium. And so, there are other ways to get across.
That's kind of my point, though, is that, like South Park or even, Penn and Teller show bullshit, they're not the rigorous scientific, make sure every argument is completely sound and backed up by the scientific process or sound reasoning. They don't follow that script rigidly, and yet they're the ones that people seem to be identifying. Mythbusters is the show people watch. These are the ones that are really kind of catching people and bringing them in and opening their eyes and saying like, oh wait, I never thought to question those things before.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. It really does. Sadly, we can't just regurgitate hardcore scientific facts to people, and there might be a certain percentage of us that find it fascinating. But the bottom line is, like, our show is successful because we joke around. And it's fun.
Entertainment. Entertainment's part of the
It has to be infused in it, and I totally agree with Rebecca. Like the whole magic angle, magicians, that works so well. I still love watching magicians. I still love, applying my critical thinking. Like, how'd they do it? What's going on stage, and the mystery of it and everything. Yeah.
But you guys brought up some interesting points, but I want to emphasize that just because something may be influential to the majority doesn't mean that that's the only way to do it or that that's influential to everybody. In fact, some people do respond to the rigorous scholarly argument.
And we have a lot of people in our group that do.
Yeah, and we need to be there for them too. Some people do respond more to the entertainment or more to the emotional appeal or the anecdotal appeal. So that's why I think we need South Park and we need Penn and Teller, but we also need more rigorous sites too, backing it all up. You need to really cover from every different angle.
And in addition to that idea, and I agree completely, in addition to the idea that we need all these approaches because they're hitting different targets, but also they're hitting the same person in different paths in their lives. So, a 13-year-old kid watches South Park and learns that Mormons are full of crap. Can get into the idea of skepticism that way.
Right.
But he's not necessarily going to be interested in South Park the rest of his life. We have to trust people to move along their own journeys and to move on from things like that and seek out this information. And that's why we just need to make sure that we're making it available for when they get there.
You also have to consider who you're trying to convince. For a lot of issues that we cover, it's actually not as important that you convince the vast majority of the public you can make a huge difference in society by convincing a few people who are politicians or who are people in power or who are regulators or whatever, or who are influential. So sometimes you need to focus your efforts in that direction. Other times it is more of a popular issue where you want to shift public opinion. And those two things are obviously related, but it's not always true that you need to convince a majority of people in order to have an effect.
That's a good point, Stephen. You just made me think of something. Like it would, maybe something you could work on would be like an information pack that you could send to school boards to really outlining,
right,
like the issues that are going on there across the country.
Well, I'll give you an example from science-based medicine, right? So I carved out one niche within the skeptical community, just promoting science-based medicine, right? So we have one organization that is really trying to influence physicians, another outlet that is really trying to educate and convince the public, and yet a third that is really aimed at regulators, at lawmakers. So we actually have different sort of arms of this one movement focusing on these various aspects and completely changing our voice and our strategy based on who we're talking to. And I think we're learning how to do that. I think the other side is ahead of the curve on us. In terms of the people who make a lot of money promoting nonsense. First of all, they have more resources because when you're doing something that makes money, it gives you the resources to get good at and to support what you're doing. But it's also they have a tradition that literally goes back centuries. And a lot of stuff we're fighting today, if you look at it historically, it's been around for literally hundreds of years. Where popularizing science really is more like decades old. Not so much centuries old. So.
Science is barely hundreds of years
right,
old.
Exactly.
Right. Well, that kind of comes back to a point you made earlier of saying, we need the different factions. We need the different groups coming at things from different angles with slightly different banners. What I hear you all saying is we need people doing all of the different types of approaches to it.
Definitely.
Yeah, and behind the scenes, we are all basically working together. I mean, maybe we're not focusing down on the same thing, but it is a movement, and the movement has lots of fingers to it.
Yeah.
Okay, dirty.
Just a mixed metaphor, that's all. Lots of fingers in the movement.
Yes.
Too many fingers in the movement.
She has a tentacles, Jim.
Okay. Anything you guys like to add? Any general advice that you'd like to give to us as a young and eager secular student society?
I say just keep up the energy.
Yeah.
Don't get discouraged.
I think
Keep moving forward.
the young people, we need your kind. The youngins, the kids.
Definitely. And don't be
Us old people, we can't keep it going forever.
And Steve
We'll
said
die
it
soon.
earlier, don't be afraid to experiment. If it's
Yeah.
something that nobody has ever tried or done before, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try it yourself.
Right,
Trial and error.
10 years
Big
ago,
part.
the nest was kind of young, and we were trying to figure out what to do, and we decided to throw, what was it, a Friday the 13th
Yes,
get
we did.
together. And it was fun, but it didn't really do as well as we anticipated, but so we did other stuff.
Yeah.
So, just experiment.
Don't be afraid to fail.
Don't be afraid to fail, because you're
experiment.
going to
Yeah.
fail. But
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter how many failures you have. It really only matters how many successes you have. It's like taking pictures,
Yep.
right? Who
That's
cares if you
very
have 1,000 bad pictures?
Yep.
You have one golden picture. That's the one you show around, and that's the one.
Yeah.
Remember the hits, forget the misses.
Okay. Well, thank you guys very much. Your guys' podcast is fantastic. We love it. It's by far one of our favorite things in the broader movement of things that we enjoy having a good time watching and listening to and useful. Like I said earlier, it's useful. So we appreciate your time. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
For more information on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast, visit them online at theskepticsguide.org, and you can download their podcast for free on iTunes. For more information and upcoming Secular Student Society events, find us on Facebook or visit our website at rebelsss.org.